Hi everyone, thank you for joining. We will give it a minute or so as more people join the meeting, and then we will kick off shortly. Thanks for your patience. Okay, I think we will jump into it and we'll keep letting people join as they come through. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us and happy Friday. This workshop is the penultimate workshop in the RISE series. So it seems like a lifetime ago with the year we've had that we kicked off this series of workshops, but we're in the second to last one today. The RISE workshops are a series of workshops kindly supported by Westpac Foundation and Paul Ramsey Foundation. My name's Rob, alongside my colleague Jess Liang, who's on the call today, and the broader team. Thank you for being here and being a part of this series of workshops throughout the year. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. For me, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And extending that broadly, just acknowledging we're dialing in from a range of locations today. Before we dive into today's session, just a few housekeeping pieces from me. We want this session to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to contribute where you can, have your cameras on, keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. We're going to have a number of sections in today's session, so please feel free throughout the session just to put your questions or comments in the chat, and we'll have time at the end of each section just to dive into those and have a bit of a broader discussion. If you have any technical issues, please reach out to myself or Jess on private chat and we'll do our best to help you. The session's also being recorded, so we'll make sure that's available after today's session as well. That's everything for me. Huge pleasure to welcome back Jeff Briggs, who's today's facilitator on strategy frameworks for social enterprises. We had such an amazing response to the last session that he ran on strategy. We thought we'd get him back and do another deep dive on this very popular topic. So Jeff, welcome, and absolute pleasure to hand over to you for today's session.
Many thanks, Rob. Wonderful to be here, and thank you to all of the people who've joined us today. I have seen the registration list. I can see that there's a number of people joining us, and really from all across the country. So welcome, and looking forward to spending the next 90 odd minutes with you talking about strategy and recognising that the Westpac Foundation, Paul Ramsey Foundation have helped to make that happen. The section today is largely focused at the RISE program and therefore the smaller growing social enterprises and the strategy frameworks associated for those. But we are going a bit broader today, and we're going to talk frameworks more broadly and allow sort of application for some bigger organisations, some organisations maybe with a little more maturity as well, to benefit from some of the frameworks that we're going to discuss today. So I look forward to sharing with those. As Rob mentioned, because there's a number of people on the line, I'm really keen to get your questions. I'm really keen to understand some of the things that are really on your mind and that you'd like us to reference today. So please don't necessarily wait till the end of each of the sections to ask those questions. Please pop them into the chat, and as they come to your mind and as we go through the slides, pop them in the chat. And at the end of each section, I'll certainly pause and we'll reflect through those and make sure that we're addressing some of the questions that are on your mind. So today is about strategy. There's a couple of fundamental things that apply to all strategy sessions and setting up all strategy sessions. There's, I suppose, a core process to go through in terms of understanding your current situation, understanding your future desired outcomes. And so I've set up today's presentation to follow those core key building blocks, if you like. followed by the third section, which is really a bit more of a deep dive into the Social Impact Hub's strategy in action, strategy format, if you like, which is really, as we discussed, focused or specifically designed for those smaller social enterprises that are looking to grow and work with nimble teams, work with smaller teams, don't necessarily have the resources and time and investment for some of the bigger organizations. So as we get into things, I've run a number of strategy sessions through my time, and I find that working with different organizations, I typically try and start with the question around, have we done this before? Have we got a current strategy? And how has the strategy worked out for you? Invariably, the response is that the strategy, they do have a strategy, they have gone through a strategy workshop or session, series of sessions, and that session was great.
How much is it? What's it so?
Oh, all right, we've got someone in the background there. And so these strategy days are invariably terrific days. They help bring teams together, they help focus direction, they help create action plans and roadmaps, and give people strong confidence in the direction of the organisation. But then 6-12 months later, invariably, it has gone into the bottom drawer somewhere, and it hasn't necessarily become a living document. And it hasn't necessarily become a document or a plan that the organisation lives and breathes or references regularly and tracks regularly, and therefore gives themselves the best chance of successfully achieving those things that they're set out to achieve. So today we're going to try and make sure that you've got some tools, frameworks, and opportunities to really ensure that the great effort and investment that you put into this strategy session that you might put together for your teams actually turns into a plan that you live and breathe and work with regularly with your teams. Okay, so with that said, these are the 3 sections that I mentioned up front. We're going to talk really about those fundamentals, what almost needs to be in place before you even kick off. And then when you are looking to engage with a strategy planning session, it's always following a format of understanding our current situation, looking at the desired future situation, and understanding what the gaps are and how we close them. So the real benefit that you're going to be looking for is, how do we capture this information in a usable way? How do we use this information so that it actually turns into something that gives us the best chance of success? And then, as I mentioned, that third section will be a bit of a deep dive on one of the Social Impact Hub formats that we use for smaller organizations. Okay. So diving in, some of the fundamentals are simply to ask yourself why you're actually investing this time. So a number of you are business leaders, a number of you are facilitators, a number of you are other interested parties. But whenever kicking off one of these sessions, it's an investment of your time and the time of the rest of the stakeholders and participants. And so it's great to be clear on why you're doing it. And there's a load of great reasons. So these sessions typically provide clarity for your organization strategy, not just for you, but for your stakeholders, those broader stakeholders in terms of people who are funding you, your clients, your partners, as well as your staff. And so when we look at staff, it's a great tool for aligning staff. So if we're clear and we're really articulate around what our direction is, it's a great way for getting the team to actually fall in and line up behind those things that are most important, those activities that are most important to your organization. Now, if done properly, you end up with clear and measurable objectives. By having these clear and measurable objectives, it gives you that great ability to then celebrate your progress, track that progress, and ensure that you've got deliberate moments in your business cycle where you're going to pause, reflect, and if you need to pivot and actually decide that, you know what, our direction's not working. We're trying this stuff, it's not working. We can evidence that it's not working. So maybe we need to pivot. And then having this document also gives you a continual focus on delivering to the organization strategy, which is really around avoiding the distractions, avoiding those things that are not urgent, phone calls, emails, and the like, and making sure that you're continually focused on the things that are important. And then again, this way to engage and reward employees. So by bringing employees along the journey and also having these measurable objectives, it's very clear and obvious as to why employees are being rewarded, because the business is succeeding, the business is on its pathway to the success direction you've laid out. Okay, so get clear on your why. It is an investment of your time and your stakeholders, and then actually set the session up with that why in mind, in my recommendation. Now we're going to have a couple of cracks at defining strategy, and our friend Rob, who introduced us, has introduced this definition to me, which I loved, and therefore I'm going to repeat. So thank you, Rob. And this definition is the strategy's integrated set of choices which best positions an organisation to achieve its vision and create its desired impact. So the bit I focus on here is this integrated set of choices. And that strategy is very much around making decisions around what you're going to do, and equally decisions about what you will not be doing. And that's how we get focus. That's how we're able to prioritize, and that's how we're able to stay true and close to the mission and vision of the organisation and the purpose of the organisation. Rob was also good enough to share with me where the word decisions came from, which is a Latin word. Oh, and it's been cut off there, and I can't even can't say it off the top of my head. Decasedere, correct me if I'm wrong there, Rob, which is from the Latin word to cut off. And again, that just reinforces this idea of focus. So by making decisions, the Latins are effectively telling us that this is the things, we're doing things effectively by deciding not to do other things, which is what gives us great focus. And it's that focus that I believe is really what is likely to help your organisation achieve its primary objectives. Now, making decisions is clear, key, and important to this process. But our friends at McKinsey have shared with us that even when they interview 2,200 of our highest paid executives across the country, that well over half of them are suggesting that, unfortunately, poor decisions are made just as frequently as great decisions. And that sadly, great decisions are not made often enough. And so what a great strategy workshop, a great strategy process helps you do, it helps you make informed decisions. And that's what we're going to hopefully go through today, is to try and put you and your organisation in a position to make really strong and informed decisions. With those informed decisions, they're likely to be better decisions, and therefore give you, again, a better chance of achieving those things that are important to you. So having directions critically important. This idea of having a vision, mission, and values proposition is really important. Those are the kind of rocks and boulders that keep or a flag on the hill that keeps your organisation clear on its direction. By having that, you're able to then go through this analysis stage and really understanding and interrogating that current situation before moving on, making informed decisions, which are then able to put into action. Keeping in mind, this is never a static process. It's never a process that is set and forget and done. It is an iterative process, and we need to continue to make decisions, put them into practice, and then analyze before making more decisions and keeping that learning loop going around, if you like. Now, again, I mentioned this vision, mission, or purpose statement, if you like, for your organisation. These are one of the fundamentals of strategy that we need to have in place before we bring the team together for a strategy workshop. We need to go broad and have a big workshop. These are some of the prerequisites, if you like. We need to put these things in place so that we're clearly able to articulate our organisation's why. And now, there may be a number of you thinking, look,
How
vision.
sometimes you book into these as well, the social impact.
Teresa, just popped you up there. So vision and mission can often be mislabeled or mistaken or considered the same thing. So I think it's worth us just talking quickly about what the definitions are here and how we define vision and mission. With vision largely being more external to our organisation, it's, if you like, we close our eyes and we have that picture of our preferred future, the world we'd like to see. And when we come into the mission, it's really about our role, our organisation's role in making that happen. And so the two need to be linked. And if successful, if you're achieving your mission, if you're successful with your mission, then what we'd like to see is that you're having an impact on the vision. Now, to bring that to life a little bit, we've got an example here from World Wildlife Foundation, who have a vision that they would like to see a future in which people live in harmony with nature. They can see that's very external. You can see that's very out of the organisation. That is a picture of the world that they would like to see. Now, their role is to conserve nature and reduce the most pressing threats to the diversity of life on Earth. Okay, so you can see that that's it's short, it's succinct, it's directional. We talk about reducing the most pressing threats, and we can see the link there. That if they're successful in their mission, we'd like to see that there's going to be an impact on the mission. Okay, now it's also important to note that they're not solving everything that's to do with that vision. They are playing a role. So many things need to happen for that vision to come to life, but they can be confident with a mission statement like this, that if they're successful, they will definitely be playing a role to fulfill that vision. Okay, that's these kind of rocks and these kind of directional statements, if you like, that really help a planning session and really help you when you get into those decisions of what to do and what not to do. Invariably through a strategy workshop, strategy session, there's going to be lots of great ideas. It's hard to say no to good ideas. Sometimes you need to say no to good ideas because they're not necessarily aligned. Okay. But yeah, articulating our desired impact. So far we've been largely talking about generic strategy sessions. This is obviously a bit more aligned to our purpose organisations and ensuring that we understand the impact, how we actually have, how our mission impacts the communities in which we choose to play. And so do we have an up-to-date theory of change logic model that articulates how we seek to achieve our desired impact? If we don't, how do we put these things together? Well, here's a framework, if you like, that helps you look at and set this up for yourself. So it's great for you to be able to start by looking at where you're actually investing. What are the things that you're investing your money into? Is it the people and the product? And what are the activities that come off the back of that investment? With those activities, there's typically a product or a service consumed, which is an output, if you like. And from that consumed service or product, what is the outcome for the consumer? And in our world, in our for-purpose world, often that's not always the same person. So sometimes there's a consumer of the service or product who's not necessarily actually been the economic buyer or the person who's purchased. So we're talking about the consumer here and the beneficiary, if you like. So have we got an understanding of the output and the outcome for those people? And then if we were to pull that community of people who are benefiting from this or lengthen it over time, how do we actually measure the impact? Can we actually see the impact over time or over a broader community if this is multiplied many times? So if we can complete that, it's very important, obviously, for us to align that back to our mission and vision and say, okay, is the impact aligned? Is the activity we're doing aligned to the purpose and direction of the organisation. Again, are we measuring this? Are we tracking this? And is there a cadence for our organisation to come back and actually revisit to understand whether we're actually staying true, aligned with the actions we're performing, are actually in line with the impact we're trying to have, and therefore the mission we have. A way to capture some of that is in this kind of framework. So we talked about making informed decisions. So again, it's great to work with facts. And so if we can, for each of these areas here, look at tangible indicators. Are they quantitative or qualitative? Are there ways for us to prove and verify that these that we're having this impact on these outcomes or the outputs? We can normally very easily measure inputs and activities. Measuring outputs, outcomes, and impacts, it obviously gets harder and harder the further we may move away from those really tangible activities. But this kind of framework helps you test yourself, and also helps bring to life when you are making assumptions. And sometimes we do have to make assumptions between the link between our activity and the outcomes that we're creating. And if we can clearly articulate that, clearly capture that, again, that's really powerful for your funders and for your stakeholders to know that when you're articulating the impact that you have, you are making assumptions, but you're very clear on what those assumptions are, and that there are some risks around making those assumptions. It's okay to have that as long as we're clear about that, and that we're ahead of that, rather than someone asking us and challenging, is that outcome really related to that impact? Well, it is based on these assumptions. Okay. So, and again, reporting is obviously clear and critical for all of our stakeholders, including our own staff and ourselves, to make sure that we're actually staying on track, and these things are actually, we're feeling the reward from the work that we're doing. Okay, so these are those. I'll stop there at some of the fundamental pieces we need in place before we would get to a strategy workshop, which is when we talk about current state and future state. Before doing that, we really want to be clear on direction. So that first section has largely been around direction, the big rocks that we want to have in place. They're going to help ensure that the next couple of pieces of work that we would do as a team run smoothly, and that there's less debate on the day around what's a good idea and what's a bad idea, because we can clearly get the direction. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask Rob whether we've had any questions come through the chat.
Yes, Jeff, we have a question. Just before we do, I was just going to ask you, maybe you can just stay a bit closer to the microphone. We lose you every now and again. I can still hear you. Yeah, you're just a little bit quiet at times. But yeah, Gillian was asking, do you have an example of filling this table out? It might be one of the earlier tables you were just showing us on that.
But maybe this one?
Yes. I can jump in here. I would say, Gillian, we actually do. We've got a whole session on outcomes measurement. So if you jump on the RISE website, just Google Social Impact Hub RISE workshops, you can have a look at one of those, and we actually go in depth across the whole process of theory of change, outcomes measurement, and you can see tangible examples from real organizations where we've actually completed this table. So that's probably the best place to go for those things. But if, by all means, if you're struggling to find something, feel free to reach out to us and we can share some examples as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob.
No worries.
Anything else coming through on that first section before we move into section 2? I will play through. So, 2 big key components of our strategy session is current state, future state, and filling the gaps. So we obviously would love to understand our current state with as many facts as possible, and so important for us to use as few assumptions as we can, but when we are using assumptions, to simply document what we are assuming. So I'm going to go through a number of tools here. These are high-level tools and templates that you might consider using depending on the size of your organisation, the maturity of your organisation, the number of resources you've got at hand, and the number of employees you're likely to be engaging in this kind of process. Whichever one you do decide might be appropriate for you, or a modification of any of these tools, the real benefit, I suppose, is the actual experience, not the template. So this template simply gives you frameworks from which to ask you questions and make sure that you're set up in a way that that gives you the best chance of extracting the right information to make those informed decisions. So this one here is very high level, and it's potentially normally used at a leadership team level, and often could be done before you actually start your workshop in order to understand how prepared you are. So this is a bit of a diagnostic to help you self-evaluate, if you like, where you are in terms of understanding this mission vision, the impact articulation, outcomes measurement, and do we have that strategic direction in place so that we can see where the focus of our workshop might be, or whether in fact we're ready for a workshop with the rest of the team. So if we're not clear on this mission vision, I suspect that might be a piece of work that we would do beforehand. So if we are clear, where's our evidence? Do we actually have some evidence that we are mature in some of these spaces? Or do we have some gaps? And if we have those gaps, what is the recommendation? How are we going to fill these, and in what order? Okay. Now I'm just going to move through some tried and tested frameworks. Now a SWOT here, it is tried and tested. Many people have used the SWOT analysis before. Some use it well, some don't use it that well. It's got a great little acronym, so it keeps coming back and getting used. I will run through some of the basics of this because it is a tool that is so often used. Now clearly, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats do somewhat speak for themselves. Most people are aware that there is a way to group these, if you like, with strengths and weaknesses being an internal focus. And so it's important to have that internal focus when we're trying to articulate our strengths and weaknesses versus the opportunities and threats. We want to have an external lens on that and look at our external environment to properly populate the opportunities and threats. Now, we do love an acronym, and we do tend to like to work from left to right through these types of acronyms. However, in the experience I've had, it actually helps frame the team better, and you get better outcomes when you actually start with the external environment first. So if you are going to adopt a SWOT, I would recommend that you actually start by asking questions about the external environment first, and we look at our opportunities and threats before moving into strengths and weaknesses. This really helps frame your organisation in its market before people tend to sometimes get stuck on what's happening in their day-to-day world and what's a day-to-day problem or a day-to-day opportunity. So trust me, those things won't get missed if they're done second, but sometimes the external environment might get missed if it's done second. So another important couple of tips and traps around using a SWOT is to try and stay away from one or two word descriptors. As we can see here in an example, price could be a strength, it could be a weakness, it could be an opportunity, a threat. An organisation could have price across all four factors there. And without a descriptor, it's not very helpful once you get into moving forward. So let's try and put a descriptor on there. Let's try and get a sentence out there and let people know that it's actually our product costs less to produce, to purchase than other competitors, or that people that we can afford to run a price promotion as an opportunity. So these are more helpful descriptors than price, obviously. And a way to test whether you are actually having helpful contributions to the SWOT analysis is to try and complete a sentence like this at the bottom of the page here. It says, given the conditions of some kind of external factor, our ability to, some kind of internal factor, leads to us being able to do something. Okay, if we can answer that, then then we're starting to use this in a helpful way. And again, here's an example that sort of suggests there's an external environment here that, given the conditions of the current recession, our ability to realize this strength, which is a cost saving over our competitors, we can take advantage of this opportunity, and leads us to recommend a reduction in price. So again, just making that hopefully a little bit more tangible as to how we can make a SWOT analysis effective and useful for the team. And so I do keep leaning back, Rob. I'm going to try and lean forward to keep my mouth closer to the mic.
Sound good, Jeff. I can hear you well. Thanks.
Right. Now, when looking at, so I mentioned before the importance of the external environment. This is another tool that is commonly used and helps frame people's mindsets and helps frame questions you can ask yourself and the team around your external environment. So it's a PESTLE tool, a PESTLE template, if you like. Political factors, economic factors, social, technological, environmental, and legal factors don't affect every organisation. So we don't need to feel obliged to fill out every single one of these columns. Do what is appropriate, but it's worth asking yourself the question. It's worth asking yourself whether you are impacted by some of these external factors. And again, we've got some additional prompts in here to again, just prompt that thinking of both yourself, the team, the stakeholders that are involved in your workshop, to understand whether these things are relevant and therefore whether they should be planned for. An additional framework here helps us create this, again, external context. We start with those industry trends, demographics, regulatory, technology trends, etc. Starting external, biggest picture we can, before coming a little bit closer to home and looking at competitors, looking at the customers, and then getting again closer to home again and looking at capabilities. So another framework which really guides the team to starting large before coming in small and getting focused, but ensuring that you're capturing as much information as you can around the current state before moving into your future state, using as many facts as you can, as much pre-work as you can. So you might find that before getting into this current state workshop, you might need to be doing some research. You might need to be doing research yourselves. You might be, you might purchase research. You might task some of your team members to find as many facts as they can before bringing their ideas to the future state table. Now, another way to a framework, if you like, for capturing some of this stuff, making sure you're capturing it in a way that is actionable, is simply set up with these types of headings. So again, context, competitors, customers, and capabilities. It's setting it up in a way that we're interrogating our current state assessment and then stretching the thinking to that actionable component and saying, okay, if we're here today, what would we recommend? Is there an obvious next step? Is there an obvious future state? Okay. Just another way for capturing relevant information for setting yourself up for the future state conversation. Now, competitors was in the previous slide here. Often we don't know how. Often it's challenging to figure out how do we talk to our competitors? How do we talk to where we sit amongst our competitors? What is a relative way of measuring ourselves? This is simply another tool by which we can start to look at the different attributes, different places we plan to play, and understand, okay, where do we have an advantage and where are we lagging? Which gives us obviously that opportunity, through our future state discussion, to start talking about exploiting some of those opportunities, those areas where we have an advantage, or are we looking to defend some of those areas where we're lagging? Are we looking to build and work on some of those areas where we're lagging and actually try and leapfrog? So it helps us understand that obviously current state is critical for us to understand where we're going to invest next. And does it align with our strategy? Okay. So we've talked to a number of current state templates and ways to capture some of your facts and capture as much information as you can around where your organisation sits today. Again, it's time to pause to see if we've got any questions before moving into the future state templates and tools that we might touch on. Rob, how are we going with the chat, mate?
Quite limited at the moment. So any questions or comments or observations, please jump in. Michelle made an interesting observation on the 4Cs framework and noted that the fifth one could be collaborators as well. So I think that's a good observation as well. Good point to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, we are using some rather commercial tools here, which none of them are fixed in their settings by any stretch. So they are there to be adapted and adopted to your organisation, and particularly for a for-purpose organisation, yeah, collaborators makes so much sense. Cool. Okay, well, I can move into this next stage and talk to some of the future state design tools. So,
Sorry, Jeff, before you move on, we do have a question that's popped in with the competitor analysis. Is that somewhat a gut feel, some of the areas where you sit? How do you make that judgment?
yeah, with as many facts as possible. so really, you'll be surprised how much stuff is out there in terms of pricing and how you're pricing according to your competitors. Brand awareness. Look, there's a lot of external bodies out there that are measuring brand. A lot of it you do need to pay for it, but a lot of it, sometimes organizations, research organizations will release older material for free, and they might have your 2020 version or your 2019 version of which brands are performing better against other brands and the like. This kind of stuff can be accessed for free. They use it as teasers to get the latest, but different organizations don't necessarily have the budget for that. Definitely get some directional stuff from some of the older stuff. And of course, you can be doing your own surveys and surveying your own customers to understand a number of the different attributes. And again, these attributes here, you can see there's X's and Y's there. There are lots of different attributes that you can be measuring yourself against with your competitors. And so I would encourage you to be thinking about what's important to your customer base and running surveys where you can to try and understand what it is that your customers are buying you for. And if you can get access to those people who aren't buying you, understanding why customers aren't buying you. Okay, well, I hope that helps a little bit. Terrific. Now, future state, this is really where your creative mind comes in. This is where really driving for some energy from the people in the teams. And so I like to split my workshops over 2 different days, sometimes over a number of different periods. I do find that sometimes you set up a morning session where we look at current state, and an afternoon we look at future state. And sometimes you've lost some of the energy by the time afternoon comes in. And this is where I'm really thirsty for the team to bring some energy and ideas and some creativity to the table. So that's one of my recommendations, is if you can split things over 2 days, I find some benefit in that. But these things can be definitely done over a single day if needed. Again, as per the previous tools, these are simply frameworks. These are simply ways, questions, if you like, for you to be asking yourself and your team to be helping you drive the right direction, drive the right outcomes for yourselves. Now, because we are talking about for purpose here, it's right for us to recognize the spectrum of for purpose. And this can sometimes be defined by how we're funded. But some of this is again one of those big directional rocks around where are we today versus where would we like to be, or where do we see ourselves into the future from a funding perspective. Are we right over here on the left, where we are fully funded by grants, or are we further to the, I'm trying to see which side of the screen you guys are, further to the right there, where we can see that we're more profit making. We are a socially driven business that invests back. Or are we somewhere in the middle with these social enterprises? And these clearly do not have to be static results for you and your organization. We're literally just coming off the end of 2 engagements, one with a charity that is moving, that has found out that many of its stakeholders are actually finding its services so valuable that they're keen to pay for them, and that they find that they're not set up to take money. They're not set up to drive revenue in the way that they have a traditional business might. But they're now moving in that direction, and literally also coming off an engagement with a social enterprise that has had 100% of its revenue coming from trading, but realizing that its brand and its reputation in the industry, that it's doing in its community, is being recognized so positively that people are looking to donate, people are looking to provide grants and money towards this organization, and that they are struggling to turn profit because they're working in markets that are less profitable than a traditional for-profit organization or profit-only organization. And so they are now moving to try and create that DGR status and try and accept some of the goodwill that people are looking to create for them. So don't look at this as a static thing. Please look at this as something that you can look into the future and say, where would we best serve our market if we had our choices, and therefore put that as a flag on the hill and understand what the gaps are between where you are today and where that desired funding position will be. Okay, now this again is quite a commercial view on how you would set up your future state organization, but I don't think it is too far from where a lot of social enterprises need to be, as well as simply a number of not-for-profits also need to be thinking a little bit, or it doesn't hurt to be asking yourselves these questions to understand where you sit in your market, what that value proposition looks like. So are we product leaders? And really are we at the cutting edge? Are we at the front of our market in terms of bringing product to market, bringing innovation to market? Or are we operationally excellent? And that really, with the way we've set the organization up, we're able to compete very well on price and cost of delivery. Or is it customer intimacy where we're really winning and likely to win or want to be winning? And are we able to tailor and shape our products and services to fit the clients that we're choosing to serve? Now, I think it's, again, I would say that a lot of people on the line would be leaning towards the customer intimacy solution. Being a for-purpose organisation, we're all very customer driven, and it's important to know that there's 2 customers that you're typically working with in this space. There is the consumer of your wonderful services and products, that is the community you're looking to serve, and that is not always the economic buyer. So sometimes some people might be buying on behalf of the consumer, and an example of that might be a school purchasing a cyberbullying workshop from a social enterprise for the benefit of the consumers, which is the children, for the benefit of the community and the impact that they are looking to make on young people. So it's important to know that we need to be intimate with our consumers of our end service, being the children in this instance, but also we need to be intimate with the customer, the economic buyer, the actual schools that might be purchasing this type of solution, and what is it that we're tailoring for them? How close are we to those economic buyers that really understand the value proposition that we're trying to drive? So it's important to split that out and make sure that we're addressing both when there is 2. Okay, now a choice is cascade. We do love a cascade, and we do love them to interact and talk to each other. So again, this is simply a framework by which you can ask questions which starts with the end in mind and gets you closer and closer and closer to your organization and the things that you can really actively influence. So hopefully we've started with clear mission and vision, values and purpose, and some financial objectives. Then we can really ask ourselves where we're planning to play and really understand, okay, is it a customer segment? Is it a product segment? Is it a geography? Are we looking to change this vertical strategy? So are we currently manufacturing, but we really should be distributing as well? Or are we simply distributing, but hey, you know what? We've actually got capability to get into that manufacturing space as well. Questions worth asking at a strategic level. How are you going to win? Are we clear on the value proposition? Are we able to actually put ourselves in customers' shoes? If we've chosen that customer segment, are we able to put ourselves in their shoes and understand and articulate what they actually most value from the activities that we perform? All those activities, how are we actually, how are our systems and processes for executing on those activities that our customers value? So where do we need to streamline? Have we built process on process on process as we've grown and developed as an organization and had new ideas or new opportunities? Have we tacked on a new process onto an old process and never gone back and actually looked at end to end? So this is our chance to pause, reflect, go back and look at end to end and understand. Okay. What can we improve here? What's going to make a difference to our organization and therefore the people we serve? And then we need to look at the actual people who are running the processes. So again, have we been promoting people up through the organization through tenure because they've been with us a long time and they've been excellent at the activities that they've performed, and therefore we put them in charge of teams. This is a great time to again reflect and understand, okay, this person was excellent at the activity, but maybe they're not excellent at managing teams and managing people and leading people. They're different skill sets. Someone who's great at an activity is not always, they might be very knowledgeable, but I think it's absolutely appropriate to be rewarding subject matter experts and rewarding high performers for their performance, not necessarily having to move them through a hierarchy. So again, a great time to pause and reflect on those kind of questions for your organization. Again, you need to ask yourself when it comes to people, are we best served to be performing all of these activities? Should we be partnering, outsourcing, and the like? So there's a couple of ways to capture this kind of information. And again, these are just simply questions to ask under those key headings and making sure that we are following these linkages to understand that if we've got these goals, where we're playing, if we play there, will we reach our goals? How will we win? If we perform these activities, is that right for where we're playing? And again, how will we configure? Again, will that help us win?
Yeah,
so,
it's be 28.
Close those loops.
Mm.
By closing those loops ensures that you're making decisions that are actually aligned. And with that alignment, you're going to have some more focus. These are reasonably broad and can be complex. We can obviously simplify them. You can simplify them, make them fit for purpose for your organization. So here's just a slightly smaller version that's going to, again, enable you to follow some key themes through your workshop, through your day, to help extract the right questions out of your team. Now, capturing this information, so asking the right questions is great. We want to capture it in a way that makes sense, capture it in a way that then is actionable, capture it in a way that you can interrogate it and ensure that you're actually coming up with answers, coming up with recommendations that make sense to you in your organization. So here's a potential way to capture those client segments, if you like. So who are the people we're looking to serve? Maybe a number of segments, there may be a number of sub-segments. Great to have a common language across your organization, and so that you're calling different segments something similar, or you're clear around what the name is for the different segments you're serving and the different products that those or services that those segments are likely to consume. That kind of clarity is really helpful for the teams. It might be clear in your mind, but having it documented like this really helps clarify for your teams who we're talking about. And then it's important also for us to get down to here and what do these segments value, and how do our services meet those client needs. So if you can have a value proposition, if you like, for each of these client segments, you're going to go a long way to making sure the team really understands what's important to those clients and what's important then to the services and the products that they're producing. Partnerships, we talked, we had a comment about collaboration previously. Couldn't agree more. We can very, very rarely do these things all on our own. What is really important is for us to be clear around who we are partnering with and what is that two-way relationship looking like. And so whether we have corporate partners, charities, governments, suppliers, service providers, and the like, it's great for us to list them. It's great for us to capture who they are or who they could be. So there may be a list of potential targets for you as well. We want to understand what is the value to you and your organization. Apologies here, client actually means yourself. So what is the value back to your organization? And are we clear on the value that the partner is getting from us? So documenting that ensures that stays top of mind and that partner is going to stay with us and we want to continue to receive that value back, but we have to ensure that we're actually driving value for them as well and identifying the potential risks to that value exchange. So are they risks of us not performing? Are they risks of them not performing? Are there risks of this partnership simply being something that's a little bit out of the control of your organization? Either way, let's document that because we need to be covering our risks through the strategy document. That'll be something, again, action that will likely come from this strategy workshop is actions to cover risks. Funding, we talked about where we'd like to be on the funding scale. So we look at these different pillars and we say that, okay, we could be generating most of our money from grants or most of our money from business or anywhere in between. What is our current focus? What would we like our future focus to be and why? If we are changing, if we're not in our desired state, what are the barriers? What are the enablers? What are we going to document here to ensure we have some tangible actions to move us forward and towards the state that we're hoping to find ourselves in with regard to our funding? Okay. And some of these will flow into other templates, such as the business. So we are looking to grow revenue, trading revenue, if you like. Obviously, that's going to flow into other templates like this. What are the things we need to change? What are the things we need to do? And so we will do an assessment across our current state. So this, hopefully we've got something like this in our previous part of our workshop where we have current state around our strengths. We can take this obviously from that SWOT for our people, process, policies, procedures, and technology. Great to simply identify where are the gaps between where we are today and where we'd like to see ourselves. And then again, actions. These actions are obviously going to be the key and critical part to this actually being a useful exercise for yourselves. I'll talk in a moment about how we capture the actions. There we go. Sorry, it's right here. So none of the templates that I've just gone through there are obviously fixed by any stretch or mandated in terms of their headings, the areas of discussion. All of these areas of discussion, technology, process, people that you found on these templates need to be made fit for purpose for your organization, the focus of your workshop and your strategy session. What I would recommend is that you then create the consistency into a field like this that enables you to bring those actions across and understand that where are you going to plot them in terms of your priorities. And this will also help you understand what are the dependencies. So some of these things you won't be able to action until something else has been actioned. So a map like this really helps us plot some of the activity. And with that activity, it also identifies what are enablers or dependencies. And so why something might be medium term following a short term execution of one of your activities. So plotting this gives you a great visual, and then it gives you a great discussion with the team around, are we trying to do too much in the short term? Have we pushed too much of this into the long term? And then really question yourselves around your ability to execute and the capacity that it really does have at different stages of your horizons or growth path, if you like. So setting this out again gives you that view and ability to interrogate whether you're overloading either certain segments or overloading certain timeframes. Okay. So Rob, I'm going to pause again as we wind up the sharing of some templates here for the future state before moving into the Social Impact Hub strategy in action section. So would you mind sharing with me whether there's been any questions come through for that?
There's been a couple. One from Tiba. Apologies if I got your name wrong, Tiba, and feel free to jump in to add context. She was asking just around those success factors you're talking about, the product leadership, operational excellency, and customer intimacy. Just your thoughts or suggestions around focusing on one of these as opposed to more than one. So, yeah. Is it better to focus on one of these success considerations or aim to balance out the three elements at the same time if possible?
Yeah, look, it probably does depend on the maturity of your organization and where you are in your growth cycle. I find it very hard for organizations typically to try and have all three in balance, or in fact, be a leader in all three. So I would be recommending on finding that one thing that you'd really like to hang your hat on. I think that's where you're likely to create focus. And again, it should line up with your mission and vision. That should help inform where you're likely to need to play here and where you're likely to need to succeed. I don't know, Rob, if you have any suggestions on that as well. But, I find aiming for one really gives you that focus, and then, as our Latin friend said, allows you to cut off and actually stay focused on a couple of things.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. I think for me, it's good to have clarity around which one of those most aligns to what you're trying to achieve and who you are as an organization. So I'm just looking at that list. I'll just take Apple as an example. Like, yes, they're a leader in products and they're known for being a leader in the products that they offer to the market, but you'd probably argue as well that they hit both the other two pillars as well in terms of operational excellence and customer intimacy. I would probably suspect, just given the stage of each organization on this call, it's just, as Jeff says, working out like where you are on that trajectory. Trying to do all three at once may be challenging, but saying, okay, what do we really want to try and achieve here? Focusing on one and then looking to focus on others might be the way to go. But again, I think it's up to each organization to say that what we've been talking about here is a range of tools and frameworks and ways of thinking, and it's really incumbent on all of us as leaders of these organizations. So how do we take those to guide us and adapt them and use them in a way that makes the most sense for who we are, the people we serve, and what we're trying to achieve? So we have another question from Tiba. Thank you, Tiba. She said, hi, Jeff, would you integrate the actions relating to funding, partnerships, people as KPIs or objectives for any of the strategic pillars, or would you just name them as critical enablers?
Okay, so the actions from funding. So basically, all of these actions that come out of the workshop, would I line them up against the strategic pillars? Yes, I absolutely would. But I think you'll find some of the actions will be operational, and some of them will be really contributing to the strategic objectives. So I think you can rightly split them, if you like, to the ones that most align to the priorities of the organisation. Sorry, I don't have the question in front of me, so I'm trying to. It was a long question, but I'd be likely to line up all of these actions definitely with an owner, and each of those owners, whether you call it a KPI or not, has an accountability to execute on those actions. So actions and timeframes, how they're established as KPIs or not, really depends on the organisation for me. Michelle with a hand up.
Yes, hi Jeff,
Michelle?
thank you. Just a really quick question.
Yeah.
I know that each organisation and workshop and stakeholders are a little bit different, but I'm just interested to hear, in your experience, when you run the current state and the future state workshops, just on average, like how long have they taken you?
Yeah, that can really vary. Like I've got a ballpark 3 hours in mind for each, so that you can run them in one day. Again, like, as I said, I do prefer to take them over to 2 days, and we're about to go into the Social Impact Hub Strategy in Action workshop, which is designed to do both in 4. It's really designed for a complete session for 3 hours. So typically 3 and 3 is something that I would strive for.
Helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
No worries. Terrific. Okay, so we're about an hour into our 90 minutes, and we're 2 out of the 3 sections done, so we're pretty much on time. Thank you for those that have asked questions along the way. Definitely keep those coming through. We've scanned a whole bunch of different frameworks so far through the time we've spent together. This will be a little bit more of a deep dive, a little bit more of an example-based experience, where we'll talk to the Social Impact Hub Strategy and Action approach, which is a strategy workshop designed for small, growing, nimble organisations that don't necessarily have vast resources at their disposal, don't necessarily have vast teams to engage with, and are really looking for something that they can execute on reasonably quickly, but have as a document that is, if you like, populated on the spot within the workshop, turns itself into a one-pager that the organisation can keep front of mind and clear and visible to its team and its stakeholders, and also turn into an action plan that can be tracked on a regular basis. So the reason this was put together was because we found that we were working with a lot of social enterprises and startups and founders that were continually torn between crisis, goal planning, distractions, interruptions, knowing that some of these things are urgent, some of these things are not so urgent, some of these things are important, some of these things are less important. And what we're trying to help create for these founders, business owners, CEOs of smaller startups that are trying to wear many, many hats, is keep them focused on those things that are important to them and make sure that they can continue to refocus despite the regular interruptions and distractions. Now, the objective here is, as I started to mention, if we're able to set this day up appropriately, we can walk away with a set of key long-term deliverables, set up some measures for each of those deliverables. We'll have some key ongoing activities to ensure that those actions that we're performing on a daily basis are actually the ones that are aligned to the long-term deliverables. And I'll have a set of 1-year milestones so we can pause, pivot, and we can actually either celebrate and know that we're actually on track, or we can reassess if we're not. We also recognise that a year's a long way away when we've got a team and we need to keep ourselves accountable to our own actions. we actually want to break things down further and into a 90-day deliverable plan as well. So this is the sort of thing we would like to try and achieve within a half-day type workshop. In order for this to be a successful half a day, if you like, there is plenty of preparation that needs to be done to make sure that that you set up well for success in this day. So, identifying the capabilities required for the workshop. So, your organisation may or may not have finance people, it may not have product people, marketing people, research people, and the like. So, legal people. So, understand what are you trying to achieve out of that day when we go back to the start of today's workshop? What's the purpose of the day? What are we trying to achieve? Therefore, what capabilities do we need? And I would recommend if you are a business leader or CEO, that you engage a facilitator. One of those facilitators could be someone within your team. It could be someone external. But we do recommend that it's not yourself as the business leader. I think it's really important for you as the business leader to actually be involved and a participant in the day rather than leading the day. I find you get much better results when you've not necessarily got the pen in your hand, as people feel they have more of an open voice. But once you've identified those capabilities, who are the people who have those capabilities? Are they in your team? Are they external? Are they part of your advisory committee? Are they part of your board? Are they peers? Who can you attract, bring in to make sure that you've got the capabilities in the room at the right time? And again, have a think about whether, again, back to purpose of the workshop, if it is about bringing a team together and that sort of team building and that team alignment, then make sure that you've got key people in the team, obviously, in the room. Lock them in, lock the dates in, and give yourself more time to prepare as well, because you'll, once you set your date, before you actually have the actual session, you want to make sure that mission and vision is in place. You want to have that big rock that we talked about, directional rocks in place prior to the workshop. We want to do the pre-work. In this scenario, we use the SWOT as the pre-work. It is a tool that you can simply send out to participants and stakeholders and have them fill out individually if you don't have the time, space, or ability to bring people together. Obviously, these things do work better if you're able to bring people together and discuss and workshop the current state analysis, but it is something that you can send out and get people to fill out individually. You do need to give yourself time to collate this work, synthesize it. And so if you are actually looking at that current state piece, synthesize it so that it can come to the workshop day in a way that that people can quite readily digest that and use it in an informed way, so that your 3 hours or so is used really effectively. So that's my recommendation in terms of preparing for this type of workshop. Now, the workshop follows the format of essentially this template, always starting with the end in mind. So the concept of this workshop is to start with our 3-year outlook. Again, it's not set in stone. So if you want a 5-year outlook, you can have a 5-year outlook. Choose your flags on the hill and how far away you need them to be. These are those key objectives of the business that align to your mission. And if you achieve those objectives, you're likely to be successful with your mission and therefore impacting that vision. Now, those are the objectives. Now we need to work backwards and measure them and say, okay, how do we quantify? How do we measure success? How will we know if we've achieved those objectives? So this process forces you to try and create some measures. Some of them are easy and quantifiable, some of them less so, but it forces you to go through the process of actually trying to measure all those objectives. Once we've got measurable objectives, we tend to look at the SWOT and our current state and say, okay, we've got current state. We understand what the measures of success are going to be into the future state. What are the gaps? And what are the things that we're going, what's the activity that we're likely to need to do? Some of that activity will be time bound, if you like, and will be measured in that 3-year time period. Some other activities will be enablers, if you like. So some of the things that you have to invest in, some of the things you have to do regularly in order for you to achieve those measures. Examples of that is a marketing plans and working on marketing. And you might need to continue to work on marketing, even though that's not your objective, but that's going to be an enabler for you to achieve one of those objectives, those measures. And so that's what sits in that strategic investment space below. So at this stage, we then look at the strategic investments and say, okay, what have we got to continually invest in order for us, for the activity to be useful? I'm going to bring this to life with an example in a moment. Once we've done that, we've got our 3-year measures, then we work backwards and say, okay, so 12 months from now, where would we need to be in 12 months for us to have any chance of hitting those 3-year measures? How do we break that down? Is it a straight line growth? Is it an exponential growth? What needs to be in place after 12 months in order for us to achieve that? With our 3-year goals in place, we'll then be able to break it down into 90-day deliverables. So, let me bring this to life a little bit with an example. With some work we did with an NDIS technology provider that linked NDIS services. And so this was a really professional organisation that were a couple of years into their journey and looking to now really accelerate the impact they were having. And so their objectives, if you like, was to have a meaningful impact to those living with disabilities. They knew that to do that, they would need a fit-for-purpose technology platform. And in their mind, they needed a team. And that was key individuals, key group of people in their organisation that were experts in their field and known to be experts in their field. And this was not externally validated, if you like, experts in their field, that this would bring credibility and help drive the other outcomes as well. So we can see those are broad and directional, that then needed to be broken down into measures. So how would we know if we had a meaningful impact to those living with disability? And we'll ask ourselves that question. The answer for the owners here and the team was really they had an aspiration to hit 1 million Australians and reach 1 million Australians. Now they knew they couldn't do that over the 3 years, so they bracketed that in there for a 5-year goal, and then broke it down, knowing that they would exponentially grow to say 250,000 people in 2023 would put them on their pathway to having made a meaningful impact with those with disability. They knew to do that, they would have to improve the quality of their referrals. Now, improving quality is obviously sort of a qualitative comment. So again, the team challenged themselves to say, how would we measure that? How would we know if we're being effective in terms of quality? And they chose conversion rates as their measure of success. So something quantitative now that they could measure and demonstrate whether they're actually on track and hitting their targets. Also, another enabler here would be the increase in content downloaded, and that would essentially contribute to them having a meaningful impact. Similarly, we're going through the process for fit-for-purpose platform. They wanted market-leading loading time, so they knew that these were barriers, if you like, for them having a great platform. People dropped out if the load times were no good. They needed to reduce the click-through rates. Again, finding really tangible, quantitative things that they could measure to demonstrate to themselves that they had a fit-for-purpose platform. Click-through rates being another barrier, something they could create learning loops around and iterate and continue to improve on. Okay. And then building the A team was high staff retention rates. It's not 100%. Sometimes you actually need to move through and have people move through your organisation. I suppose it's really the highest performers, it's those most valuable people that you generally need to hold on to. Not every recruit is going to be the perfect fit for your organisation, so having 100% retention rate is not necessarily a goal that I would necessarily suggest people strive for. But employee NPS and things like that, those are obviously things you want to maximise. So once they had their measures in place, we looked at the current state. Now, contrary to what I shared previously in the workshop, these descriptors could be longer and probably would be better had they been longer. So they were looking at their strengths. They knew they had a good team, they had a good brand, they knew their technology needed work, etc. And there were opportunities there with a number of NDIS providers out there, and obviously regulatory and competitor threats that needed to be considered. Off the back of that, some decisions were made around what they needed to invest in. And we needed to invest here in a robust impact measurement framework. That was not something that they put an end date on necessarily. That was something that they believed they would continue to invest in, and would be an enabler.
Sorry, Jeff, we're losing you a little bit.
Sorry,
Apologies. Apologies to jump in. We're just losing you a little bit at times. If you could lean into the mic or just...
I'll lean in. Can't get my ugly mug too close to the screen though. It can put some people off. So
No, you're looking
I'm
great.
losing my voice a little bit there. Okay. So also strong marketing plan. Again, that was one of those things. It didn't necessarily have an end date, just an enabler for some of the other work that they were doing. With those long-term enablers in place, we then looked at breaking down the 3-year measures into 12-month measures and say, what would be your lead indicators? What would be the work that you'd need to do after 12 months to make sure that you're on a pathway here? Some would be directly linked and simply a smaller number of the 3-year measure, and some were actually things that they needed to put in place in order to start actually impacting that 3-year measure, such as developing an HR plan. So look, at the stage we don't have an HR plan. We want high staff retention. But at the moment, we don't have the plan. So at the moment, the plan is create a plan. And these are valid milestones to put in place for yourself when these things are not. When you are simply looking at the gaps, being realistic about those gaps. Now, so hopefully you can see through this example that there's a strong link between the 12-month milestone and that 3-year measure. Connections, resource downloads, website traffic, and the like. Okay. Now, 12-month milestones. These are great, if you like, midterm rocks there for you to be able to strive for, create goals, and measure and then assess whether the team is on track and the organisation is on track. Obviously, you don't want X's in there. Obviously, you're going to have your real numbers in there. But in terms of measuring your team and working with the team, making this a living document, obviously strongly recommend breaking this down further into 90-day deliverables. And so that's where we built this template that allows you to grab over here on the left-hand column where your annual milestones are, and say, what are the micro actions, if you like? What are the regular actions? What are the shorter term actions that need to be performed in order to be moving towards that 12-month objective? So that we've again got time to see where things are working, where things are not working. Again, I'll give you an example here. That one of the 12-month milestones was to increase website traffic. Well, we needed to develop this SEO plan, and that we were able to measure it. We were absolutely assigning an owner, and this is where your strategy plan can so often come unstuck. And we go back to the cartoon at the beginning of the session where we have a great strategy session, but the execution's not there. It so often comes down to the actions not having owners. So I'd strongly encourage you to try not to leave the day without the owner. And if you're debating, and there's often a debate, oh, who does this really belong with? Who does this really belong with? Give it to yourself to figure out who it belongs with. And the ownership sits with you until you find out who it actually belongs with. But encourage you not to leave gaps there. Give dates, have some comments there, have some opportunities for people to interact and make sure that actually where you can see that there are dependencies and overlaps between some of these actions. Let's call them out and let's make sure that somebody's working with somebody else in the team, and that while there is one accountable person there might be multiple people working on specific actions and activities. Okay. So hopefully you can see the breakdown there, and how that kind of workshop might flow backwards from your end state 3-year objectives into measuring and making sure that there's tangible measures, make sure that you know when you've been successful or not. Looking against current state to determine what are investments that are required to enable those measurements to be achieved, 12-month milestones, and 90-day action plans. So we're coming to the end here, and just leaving you with a checklist to test yourself and to critique yourself and to understand whether you've run a day that has been based on data and experiences, and therefore whether you've been able to make informed decisions. And how would you test against the room to understand whether you've really genuinely got buy-in? Have you been able to get the right people in the room that are going to execute on this, and have those people that have got the actions against their name, were they part of the decision making, and are they able to buy in? Have we really considered our capabilities? Have we stretched ourselves too far? Is there a gap between the action that we're trying or hoping to achieve versus what capabilities we actually have in the organisation to achieve those activities? Are the milestones appropriately time bound? Is the messaging clear? And so again, we really encourage you to build these strategies in a way that the language is accessible and readable to all of the stakeholders in your organisation. Something you might want to share externally, but at a minimum to be using internally. Many great organisations will have this plan on a page on their wall, something that they refer to at team meetings on a regular basis, something that if you've got new starters in the organisation, that they can read it. There's language in there that makes sense to pretty much anybody, and people can follow, so it's understood and relevant. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can check against, and maybe do a few little tweaks should that not necessarily be lining up appropriately. So that's been a reasonably quick snapshot at the strategy in action template and how that might come to life in a smaller organisation that doesn't have the large resources to get involved in deep strategic planning sessions. In time for me to ask Rob again how we've gone with the question sections, and whether we've had any more questions come through, because we've got another 6 minutes to address any of that.
We haven't had anything come through on the chat, Jeff, but just to open it up, anyone had any thoughts, comments, or questions off the back of that section Jeff has covered, please feel free to jump in on the chat or just unmute and we can do our best to answer for you. Jess?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I thought I'd give everyone else a chance first. Thanks, Jeff. I know you kind of touched on about getting people on board, but do you have some advice in terms of how you engage with the board through this process versus engaging with your teams and volunteers as well, and sort of thinking about that in terms of the workshops and the frameworks and techniques you've talked us through?
Yeah, absolutely. And every answer starts with it depends. And it does depend on the engagement of your board and how you're using your board. So we know that some boards are highly functioning and have some amazing history, strength and capability on the board and engagement with the organisation. And some boards are a little more community focused and really focused on being connected to the community, more so and ambassadors, if you like, than connected to the organisation, the running of the organisation. So obviously regardless, having the board connected and engaged on this process, knowing that it's happening, and being in agreement around the mission and the vision is critical. And then, yes, having an invitation, again, I would bring it down to the capabilities you're looking for. If you're clear on the capabilities that you need in the room, then I think I'd be articulating that with the board to say, these are the capabilities I'm looking to bring into the room. And as a result, I'm really looking forward to inviting X and X to come and join to contribute those expertise. But yeah, the board obviously is a team that you would obviously be presenting back to once the strategy plan is in place as well.
Any other questions or comments? No, doesn't look like it. I've just got a quick one for you, Jeff, just to wrap up. Oh, hang on. Janelle, this has been great, thought-provoking session. As a wannabe startup solo founder at the moment, I can see the value, but feel overwhelmed in trying to figure out how to bring my supporters into the process and get them contributing to the actions. What are your thoughts or observations on that, Jeff?
Yeah, look, not knowing your organisation and what contributors look like, that is it's a difficult one to answer. But look, I think you'll find that if you've got supporters and contributors, and if you're engaging them in the decision-making process, the likelihood of them wanting to volunteer and wanting them to actually take ownership of some of those actions it obviously rises if they've been part of the process of decision making. So I simply suggest, do get them involved, do make them feel part of the business, do make them feel like their contributions are valued, and also maybe demonstrate how it can't be done without them. But yeah, sorry, not knowing your organisation, that's a tricky one to truly wrap my head around.
Okay, well, look, in the interest of time, I think we will wrap it up there. So, Jeff, thank you for today's session. Super helpful. Great just to get some different insights and ways of approaching strategy. Jess Liang is going to kindly share a feedback survey in the chat. We would love it if you give, it's a 60-second survey max, and I think there's an opportunity to win the $500 goodie prize. So any feedback, good or bad, you can provide us in relation to the workshop session series would be wonderful if you could take a minute to do that before jumping off. All that remains for me to do is to say a huge thanks, Jeff, for taking the time to run today's session, and thank you to everyone for joining today. Great to have you on board, and join us for the next and final workshop of the year, which will be around governance and thinking about getting an advisory team set up for your organization, which is taking place on the 3rd of December. So hopefully we will see you all at that session, and I wish you all a great afternoon and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.